Most people, when they get into something new, they expect that after 6 months to a year, you'll kind of have something to show for it. And if you're practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you've been going for a year and a half, you have 2 or 3 stripes on your white belt, you talk to your friends, they're like, oh yeah, you're doing this karate thing. How's it going? Well, you tell them, first of all, it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but second of all, you're still a white belt. And it's not to say it's embarrassing to tell people that you're a white belt, but you feel like you kind of have to over-explain, like, yeah, I'm still a white belt, but I got these stripes, and I've been going for a long time, and I'm actually pretty good, and I can kind of do all this stuff to someone who hasn't trained before. It's not quite the same as saying, yeah, I'm a blue belt. A blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is one of the most sought-after ranks, and I believe it is a huge change. Some people may argue that the blue belt is still a beginner rank. After all, you still have purple, brown, and then black. It's only the first colored belt you receive, but it's something that takes a long time to get. Now, maybe in the grand scheme of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if you talk about the average black belt journey takes about 10 or so years, maybe 2 years of that is not that long of a time. Moreover, once you get that blue belt, you're almost universally recognized as being able to out-grapple most people on the planet who've never trained. Now, there are still some size and strength disparities that can throw a monkey wrench in that system. For example, if you're a 135-pound blue belt and a 245-pound completely jacked linebacker comes in, chances are you're going to have a really tough time choking him out. It's not to say you can't. You might be able to hit him with a quick arm drag, take his back, and get him in the rear naked, but it's going to be way harder than someone who's more close to your weight and size. But let's say you're average weight and average size going against someone who's average weight and average size. If you've earned a blue belt and they've never grappled before, you should be able to out-grapple them. And you should be able to show them some stuff. That's another thing that happens when you achieve the rank of blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Oftentimes you're going to be asked, or even not asked, just subconsciously expected to show up and teach. You don't necessarily have to teach classes, although sometimes that does happen. You're often going to get paired up with newer people and asked to help them out a little bit, to show them a few techniques and to make them feel welcome. Personally, I think this is an awesome responsibility and it's something I enjoy doing. I like working with people who've never trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before. However, a lot of people don't like this, and they feel the shifting expectations of getting a blue belt means it's no longer as fun. When they were a white belt, they had the luxury of making mistakes and no one really worrying about it or looking at them as if they should know what they're doing. But when you're a blue belt, you kind of should know what you're doing. You don't have to be an expert, but people expect you to at least know the basics. And my friend has the saying, when you're a blue belt, you suck and it's your fault. And while that may be true, I personally think blue belt can be one of the most exciting ranks in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Because yes, you kind of still suck. And by suck, I mean you have a lot of knowledge gaps, and that's pretty normal because there's so much space in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When you're a white belt, you don't even understand what you don't know. When you're a blue belt, you see the entire game and you understand that you have gaps in your knowledge. You understand that there is a lot of things that you can still work on, and you feel deficient. But this is true even for black belts. When you're a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, doesn't mean you know every single move in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It just means you've trained long enough and you've achieved enough skill. You certainly know way more than a blue belt, but it's impossible to know every single aspect of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as deeply as the things that you know best. And when you're a blue belt, you're going to have a handful of techniques that you know best and that you're really good at, but you're going to have been exposed to so many other areas of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that sometimes it can feel like you're never going to learn it all, which actually is true. You are never going to learn it all. Some people get discouraged because you have the increasing expectations, you have the awareness of how it's impossible to learn everything. But when you take those expectations and you put them on yourself as, hey, I should do better, I should know more, because I'm a blue belt, I should be tapping out these white belts, that's when you start going down the train of quitting. It's when you start going down the train of negative thought loops, because the fact of the matter is, the belts are not a hard and fast way to gauge skill. People like to think of it that way. Even when I was a blue belt, I was guilty of saying in my own mind, oh, I'm going against this white belt. I should probably tap him out. And the words should probably really need to be focused on, because should probably doesn't mean always forever no matter what. Really, when you're in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the ranks are more of a guideline. And unfortunately, or fortunately, that means you can still get tapped out. Jiu-Jitsu works no matter what your rank is. So if you're a blue belt, you're going to get tapped out by white belts. If you're a purple belt, you're going to get tapped out by blue belts and sometimes white belts. And if you're a brown belt, you're going to get tapped out by purple and maybe even occasionally blue belts, because it happens, especially when you're training. You're not always at your peak. You're not always ready to go as if it was a competition, and you're learning and you're training. You should be developing these techniques. So blue belt's awesome, or at least it can be. But if you start going down these negative thought loops of putting pressure on yourself and thinking you have these expectations that aren't real, you might end up quitting. However, I think blue belt is awesome because you get to tell people that you're a blue belt. You no longer have to say, oh, I'm just a white belt, even though I've been training this long and all this stuff. If you get to say you're a blue belt, you get a little bit of instant respect. Instant respect from people on the mats and off the mats. On the mats, you get the respect because, honestly, people know it's a little bit difficult to achieve. They know you're, more of an intermediate player at this point. You can understand a lot more concepts. You're starting to play with leg locks. When you're off the mats, you're just not a white belt anymore. And as fun as it is being a white belt with no expectations, nobody likes to tell their friends, yeah, I've been training for 6.5 months, but I'm still a white belt. But yeah, man, it takes a long time to get a blue belt, and for good reason, because it's pretty awesome. So if you're fortunate enough to make it to the rank of blue belt, don't quit. It's worth it.